Okay, let's look at when the leading coefficient is not 1. So that would be when you're factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. So that means we have a number in front of x squared besides the number 1. So what you're going to do is trial and error method. So there are little tricks you can learn, but I don't teach those. I basically find that people forget them and don't remember how to use the tricks, so I just teach it the straight trial and error method. So what you're going to do is look at the first term. So in our case, that would be the ax squared. And then you're going to look at the last term, which is c, and you're going to you're going to factor those two, and then you're going to check, this is the trial and error, to see if it gives you the correct middle term. So remember, the middle term is whatever you get from the outside and the inside terms. So let's look at an example of factoring 14x squared plus 30x plus 4. So remember, the first step is always to pull out a GCF if you can, and in this case we can. We can pull out a 2. So I am going to divide all three terms by 2, and I'm going to get 7x squared plus 15x plus 2. So you always want to do that first. And then the other thing you want to do is look at the signs. And so remember, we said if it multiplies to be positive and adds to be positive, both our signs are going to have to be positive. So that's just going to help us. Okay, so when I go to factor, I'm going to put this 2 that I factored out in front of my parentheses because it can't just disappear, and then we'll come back to this in a minute. So the first thing you do is look at the first term, and my first term is 7x squared once I've pulled out that GCF. And when I look at 7x squared, the only option of what multiplies to be 7 is 7 and 1, so it's 7x times x. And this is because 7 is prime. So this makes this a little bit easier. So I'm going to put in my 7x and I'm going to put in my x. That's my only option. You then need to look at your last term, which is a positive 2. And again, 2 is prime, so my only option of what multiplies to be 2 is 1 times 2. Now, what you need to do is place these in here, and you have to check and see if you've placed them in the right place. So I'm going to go ahead and put plus 2 and a plus 1, and I'm going to check and see if it works. And I actually made it so it's not going to work right away to show you this trial and error. So you have to remember, we did our first term, so we know that works. We did our last term, so we know that works to be 2. What you're checking only out of FOIL is the outside and, I'll do it up here, and the inside terms. And remember, those are supposed to add to give you this 15x, and that means you've factored it correctly. So if I multiply my outside terms, I have 7x times 1, which is 7x, and my inside terms, 2 times x is 2x. And when I add these, I get 9x, which is not what I needed. So that tells me I factored this incorrectly. So what we're going to do is switch the 1 and the 2 and see if I can get this to work. And if it does, then we know we factored it correctly. Otherwise, it might not be factorable. So let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to switch, and I'm going to put the 1 first and then the 2. And now we're going to check. So our outside terms, when we multiply, 7x times 2, I get 14x. The inside terms, 1 times x, I get just 1x. When you add those, you get 15x, which is what I needed. So it's factored correctly. So this factors to be 2 times 7x plus 1 times x plus 2.